Welcome back to the second part in my How to Draw Scrolls series, I suppose, even though there's only two of them. So following on from the last video where we were doing it by hand, now I'm going to take those drawings across into Photoshop and start vectorizing them and building up a kind of shape library so we can build unique scrolls that are different each time. But before I crack on with that, if you're a fan of gold leaf, sign painting, reverse glass, digital processes and much more, then you're in the right place because that's all this channel's about. And I try to release a video every couple of weeks. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. I reward my patrons with a different vector design every month. I credit them in the videos, early release to the videos, and also bits and bobs that I make. I sort of upload them to the Patreon page as a little bonus. If that's too much of a commitment and you just fancy buying me a pint, there's a link to my PayPal me in the description, and you can just donate any amount you want, and that will go towards growing my beer belly over the coming year, I suppose. Also, there's a link to my Etsy shop in the description where I'm selling some of my designs, and a link to the Facebook group where we're all kind of sharing ideas, helping each other out. Really good place, over 600 people on there now, so you should definitely check it out. Anyway, that out of the way, let's crack on with it.
Okay, so I'm starting in Photoshop, and as you can see, I've imported the photograph that I took of the first spiral that I drew. If you haven't watched the first part to this video, I'll put a link to it in the top right corner here. That covers drawing the scrolls by hand and sort of shading them, but you don't need to see that first part to sort of do this second part. So if you're only interested in the digital side, then we can crack on from here. But what I'm going to do first is get up the panels that I need. So I need my layers, so I'll go to Window, Layers. I need my shapes, and I need my paths. Now, what I'm planning on doing is creating a shape library or shape folder of the different leaves and spirals and things like that that are going to help us build custom scrolls rather than just having a sort of preset version. And what I'm going to do first is create myself a new folder. Now, what you've got here in these shapes, these are default, and I don't know when you'd ever use them. They're a bit random, you know, trees, animals, but we can create our own. So I'm going to start this here, create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Scrolls. And click OK. Now with this selected, anything I add is going to go into this folder. You can also export this folder once you're happy with it so that you can kind of share it with people or add it to a different laptop or computer that you've got. But anyway, let's get started. I'm going to start by using the pen tool, and I can get access to that by pressing P or clicking on this little icon here. Now something I'm going to be using that I haven't used in my videos so far is something called the rubber band, and you can get to that by within the pen tool settings, click on this, and then there's a little check mark where you can go rubber band. You can choose the thickness of it and what colour it is. You don't really want to change the colour. If you were working on a blue background, you're not going to want this to be blue, but you know, this is going to be okay for us. Now what the rubber band is something that helps you see where the next path point is going to go. So if I was to click here and dragging along the direction of the curve, that's where I'd want my first path point. And the rubber band, if you can see here, is now a visual showing me where I click and how that's going to follow on from this curve handle here. So if I clicked it here, that's where it'd go. If I click it and drag it, you know, you can still have the same level of manipulation over it. It just gives you a little visual. Now, the reason I use that, and the reason I'm going to use my curve handles today, is because I want to see a fluid path. I don't want any kind of kinks in this. So, for example, with your curve handles here, they are a continuation of the path you've just drawn. So you can hold the control key and manipulate the path as a whole. But if I, for example, wanted to do a right angle out of this, it's not going to let me. If I click here, you can see that's just drawn there because it's following the curve. If I press the Alt key or hold the Alt key down and click on here, that kills that curve handle and means I can start drawing at right angles from the curve. That's handy, and it's a necessary part in some cases when we'll be drawing the leaves. But for when you're drawing an actual fluid curve, you might think that you're going to do this really accurately and think, yep, that's where I want that next curve point. But it's not until you zoom in that you might see that this isn't perfectly smooth. You know, it comes in a little bit here and then goes out. Barely noticeable, but that will be noticeable when you come to sort of applying paint effects to this part. So for that reason alone, I'm going to make sure that this spiral is drawn, making sure that I'm always having a curve handle on every point. The way to do that is to do it in small increments. So let's just start pulling along the direction of the curve, then let go. Come up a bit further, do the same thing. I kind of want to do this all the way around, but never, you know, if you wanted to do it too close, you can see that's coming back on itself because of where that curve handle's coming out to. So we're always going further than the curve handle, and to a point where we're going to have to create another curve handle. And by that I mean, you know, if you clicked here, that's pretty much perfectly following that spiral, but then because you haven't clicked and dragged, you haven't got a curve handle to follow. So go a bit further than it looks like you need to, click and drag. Yeah, and that is a good spiral. And what I'm going to do with that spiral is add that as my first custom shape into my scrolls folder. And to do that, I go to Edit, Define Custom Shape. I'm going to call that Spiral. Ignore this. I've made this as a path and this is recognizing it as a shape, but this is just how that's going to preview. The rest of the things we're going to do as actual shapes, so they'll make a bit more sense. So I'll click OK. And there that is in here. So if I click off this path, so that's hidden, I'm going to go to my custom shape tool, which is here, or you can press U. Now, by default, this won't be set as a custom shape tool, it'll be set as the rectangle tool. So if you're on that, you can either hold down Shift and press U, and that will skip you through your shapes until you get to the custom shape tool, which is like that sort of splat. Or you can click and hold and then come down and select it manually. I really recommend getting used to shortcut keys when you're using this. You know, there's so many tools, and if you remember the shortcut keys for all of them, you'll just have such a quicker workflow. So in this case, we've got our new shape selected, but one thing to note here is that it's marked as a shape and I want it as a path. So I'll show you what will happen if I draw that as a shape. So I'm going to hold Shift, because that will constrain the proportions, drag it, but then as soon as I let go, that's filled that as a custom shape, and that's not what I want. I want it as a path. So let's undo that, come up here, path, hold Shift, drag, and I need to just hide this so that doesn't keep popping up, because that's getting a little bit annoying. And then that shows in our path menus. Click on it, then we can do anything that we can with a normal path. So for example, if I wanted to run a brush stroke along this, so if I press the B key, that takes me to my brush. You can see how large that brush is, but I can change that by using the sort of square bracket keys to bring that up and down. And then I can just press this little button in the paths menu to stroke that path. And that looks pretty good. That's a pretty nice even spiral. It's a really handy thing to have in the shapes tool as a basis for your scroll. Probably won't use it as much because the next one I'm going to create is the kind of actual first main body leaf, and that you'll use more than the spiral. But the spiral is handy. So that's that. That's how you make your first shape. So let's move on to creating an actual leaf. So moving on, we can now start to add some of the leaves to our shape folder, or our scrolls folder, sorry. So go back to my custom shape tool, make sure I'm set on path, and I'm going to shift and drag that spiral over what we have here. Press my move key, it's going to drag that in place. So that fits pretty well over this drawing. And what I'm going to do is create what we'll probably use much more than a spiral as the basis of each scroll. Now this path, any of these points can be manipulated, and to do that you need to use this white arrow key. Again, the black one will be selected by default. You can press Shift and A to go down to the white one, or obviously click and hold to go and select it directly. Now each of these that you click on, that means you can move that. So I'm just going to move this one a little bit. Press Control and Space Bar to zoom in. And the curve handles can be manipulated as well on all of these. So let's just bring this around, something like that. Now I'm going to go back to the pen tool, and now I'm going to continue this path to create a shape. Now I've got a curve handle here that is not going to do me any favours because I want to actually make a right angle. So to do that, as I hover over this, if I hold the Alt key and then click, that's got rid of that handle. And I'm going to start this same way as last time, making sure I'm dragging it and always keeping a curve handle to continue that sort of nice fluid curve. And I'm going to work my way around this. And kind of, you know, the idea here is for it to really gradually taper in. If you're on the pen tool, you can always click the Control key and that will take you to your white arrow tool. So that's a handy thing as well, knowing that you can always manipulate each path point as you're drawing it. Just going to zoom out a tiny bit. So let's pop that on screen. So that is going to be my main basis for any scroll that I draw. So I'm going to do it exactly the same. I'm going to go to Define Custom Shape. I'll call this Scroll Body. I'll call it whatever you like. And that's that. Really good starting point for any of this. So let's just see how that works. I'm going to press U to go to my Custom Shape tool. This time I want it as a shape. So change this from path to shape. Hold Shift, click and drag. There you go. So that's our first leaf. And it's now about building that library up. So what I'm going to do is trace the leaves on here. I'm going to trace these leaves that I've drawn, even though they are pretty similar. You know, they're not exactly the same, so it's good to have mildly different variations of the same leaves. So I'm going to quickly run through that in a time lapse now, and then we'll get to building our first scroll. Right, so got myself some leaves and the sort of basis of the scroll, so now we can start building this up. Now what I'm going to do, go to the Custom Shape tool, make sure it's set to shape, and just holding the Shift key, select the one that I want, which is going to be the starting point. I'm just going to hold Shift, click and drag. Now you see what that's done is added a new layer automatically, which is good because you don't have to worry about keep adding new layers. So if I just press return on that, what I'm also going to make sure I've selected is if I go to my move tool, I'm going to make sure auto select is on. I don't always use this, but it's just quite handy when you're doing something with quite basic shapes, because it means you don't have to keep going to your layers panel and you know, selecting the one you want to move. So we're ready to go. Now I'm going to go back to my custom shape tool. I'm going to click on a different shape. So let's start with something that's a little bit different to what was actually on the drawing. So if I hold shift and drag, press return, it's added the other layer. I can then press the V key, hovering over it using the auto select, means I can kind of drag that into place. Press Control and T to transform, and I'm just going to zoom in and then using my arrows just nudge this into place. There you go, and there's the start of our scroll. That looks pretty nice so far. So let's go with a different shape. Click on a different shape, press U to get the custom shape tool, hold shift, drag this into position, and press and rotate it. Now what we can see here is not all of these work perfectly, you know, so we've got this little bump bit out here, and that's not a problem at all. In fact, it's a really easy fix. So what I'm going to do with this shape selected, I'm going to go to my white arrow, and then any single one of these points can just be moved. So if I just click on this point, that means I can just tweak that to where I want it, so that it's not kind of folding over any of the lines. That looks more like it. Yeah, that is looking pretty good so far. So let's go with another one of these type. So click on that, press U, hold shift, press return, move it into position, scale it down, and just kind of put that where you think that needs to go. So now let's go for the more elaborate leaf. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. Right, now we can move on to the outer leaves. Now again, these are going to need a little bit of tweaking, because obviously this is a spiral. You know, I'm not going to be able to match the curve going around a whole spiral. But let's start with this one. That one looks alright actually, so let's go on to the more curved one. That one's going to need a little bit of manipulation, so again onto that A. And obviously as you're doing this, you know, you can just add any combination of these inner leaves, and you know, these, I like to keep them very basic for the silhouettes that we use for reverse glass, but you know, these can look really ornate by shrinking these down and having some of these leaves sort of duplicated and just small coming out of these gaps as well. Get some kind of really nice effects with that. And that's a pretty nice little scroll there. Could add another little bit in here, but I want to keep it relatively simple because I'm going to show you some kind of overlapping techniques with this as well to make some nice borders. But for now, that is how to kind of build up a scroll using your different shape brushes. So here we've got a load of different leaves and different vector shapes. What I can do then is convert this into an actual brush rather than a shape. It's just another handy thing you can do. I thought I may as well show you. If I go to my brush tool by pressing B, and then what I can do is set a new brush group as well. So new brush group, call this scrolls. Okay. Now anything we make will go into that brush group while it's selected. So what I'm going to do is go to my layers. I'm going to shift select them all. Then I'm going to press Control and E, and that merges them. I'm then going to Control and hover over the layer, and you'll see that will bring up my selection, the sort of marching ants symbol over it. I'll click on that. Then I go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. I'll call that Scroll 1. So now when I press B and go to my brushes, just start a new layer. So you can see now I've got a brush of this scroll. So if I just create a new document, I've got my colour set to black, this is my brush. If I just click somewhere, that's drawn that scroll. You know, you can, using your sort of square bracket keys, going up and down, kind of click them wherever you like. Not that this is particularly appealing, I'm just sort of showing you, how it works just as a single click. But yeah, that's how to make the brush. So what I'm going to do next is, using this brush, go on to make a really nice border where the scrolls kind of intersect with each other. Right, here we go. I've now got my brushes open, which you can go to Window, Brushes. I've created a few more scroll brushes since that first one. I'll show you what they look like. So the first one, just get my layers so you can see. I've got the first brush, which is this one, which you just saw me make. Second one, which is actually the same brush, but I just did some kind of additional leaves, like I sort of mentioned. And then a third one, which is just similar kind of technique, just different orders of some of the leaves. So really quick to make and really effective as well. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the first brush that we made, and I'm going to use it to create corner ornaments that kind of interact with each other. So the first thing I'm going to do before using the brushes is create myself a border. Now this is just a standard 16 by 12 inch canvas. So I'm going to go to my marquee tool, which is there. We'll press M. Just run a thin line down the side. I'm going to press G to get my paint bucket, and I'm going to fill it. Control and D to deselect. So that is this layer here. I'm going to duplicate that layer. Press Control and T. Holding Shift, I'm going to rotate that, and that does that in increments, and that will let me snap to 90 degrees. So while that still has the transform tools visible, drag that up to the top, drag the sides in, press return, and I'm going to merge these two. So I can just hold Control and then press Control and E, and that merges them. I'm going to duplicate this, so let's drag this down to the bottom, go to Edit, Transform, rotate 180, and that gives us our full border. You can do the same thing again, Shift Select, Control and E, and that's that. We've got a sort of nice border to start with. So just to add a tiny extra little bit to that, I'm going to get my Magic Wand tool. So this is this one here, or you press W. Select within the border. Let's just bring this a bit closer. And then I go to Select, Modify, Contract. And that's going to bring that selection in by 20 pixels, which you can see is done there. And then I just want to stroke the inside of that. So I'm going to Edit, Stroke, Stroke Inside, color black, 15 pixels, okay. Right, that's going to be our border. And I think that looks pretty nice. So let's just get this back on screen. Click on the background layer and then just add a new layer. I'm doing this in this order because I want these brushes to go behind our kind of border what we've just created. So I'm going to press B and that brings up my scroll brush. So I'll click on anywhere on here and there. That's where we're going to start. So firstly, let's just transform it and scale it. So I press Ctrl and T, I'm going to rotate this. I want this to be going into a corner, so this kind of top part here wants to be quite flat. So it doesn't have to be 100% at the moment. Just scale that in. And I'm going to come up to this corner here. Just going to nudge that with my arrows. That's good. Now, ignoring this overlap here, we can sort that afterwards. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. Let's just move that. And what I want this to do is interact with this other one. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Vertical. And that has mirrored it for me. So when I rotate this around, you can then have this so it kind of crosses over with the other one. So let's start there, and fully aware that that doesn't look very nice at the moment. It looks like a big old sort of mess in the center here, but it's going to look really nice, and I'll show you how. So just to make this visible, and this is for demonstration purposes only, you don't need this, I'm just going to add a solid color in here so you can see how this works. Let's go with something like that. And what I'm going to do is add a stroke, an outer stroke, to each of these scrolls. So if I double click on this layer, it takes me to my layer styles. I click on stroke, and that's already set as an 8 pixel stroke on the outside of it, and the color is white. So let's just go a tiny bit bigger. Let's go to 10. But that's how I want this to be. So I can go OK. I don't need these brushes open anymore, so let's close those. And then I want the same layer effect on the other one. So let's just right click this, copy layer style, paste layer style. Okay. Next step is I want to actually apply this stroke so that it's a part of this layer and not a floating layer effect that can be turned on and off. So to do that, I right click on it, go to create layer, shift select, Control and E. And do the same thing for the one underneath, create layer, shift select, Control and E. Right, and now we're in a good position to start making these things overlap. So let's start with a real simple bit. So this little bit here, I want this to overlap this one here. The way I do that is I've got my auto select on, so I select the layer I want. This I can just use the marquee, but in some cases you'll need the pen. I'm going to take this section here that I want to overlap this leaf, and I'm going to press Control and J. Now what that's done, if I just hide everything else, has made this. Can't see that it's done anything at the moment, but if I now move this to above the other scroll, you can see that gives you that really nice sort of intertwined bit there. I think, you know, I'll probably do the same here. Let's go with both of these parts coming over that. So again, I think we're gonna, which is it? This one here. So I'm going to do this with the pen tool, and you only need to do it in the section where this actual leaf is. So I can just take this bit here, go to my paths, my hidden those, make a selection, Control and J, and then just move that up. There you go. Got some really nice stuff going on there. I think the final bit, I'm probably just going to make sure that this big part of the leaf does sit in front of this little sort of section here. So press V, click on it, got auto select. Just need that section there really. Control and J, then just drag that up. There we go. And that's it. You know, there's so much you can play around with here. Really easy thing to do. Let me just show you how effective that is. If I turn off this red background, you can see that is what we're aiming for. Just these kind of really nice silhouettes of leaves, but the kind of gaps in there showing where they're sort of wrapping around each other. What I'm going to do is merge these. So everything that we've just made, Shift Select, Control and E. And there you've got the sort of beginnings of a really nice kind of corner ornament. Right, that's a little bit big at the moment, but you know, shrink this sort of thing down. And yeah, just something very nice, and obviously something that can be built upon as well. So there, if you have got these little bits poking out from behind that border that you don't want, let's just go to this. Right, it's just going to go in here. Press the magic wand so that the inside of this border is selected. I'm going to go to Select, Modify, Expand. I'm just going to do this by a few pixels. The only reason being, when you use a magic wand and then delete stuff, you'll end up with a sort of banding line which you don't want. So let's put that back on screen. Control, Shift and I. That inverts the selection, so it's sort of selecting the negative space. Then selecting your scroll layer, you can come up to the top here and just press the backspace to delete those little bits that are sticking out there. And there, nice little corner ornament which you can then duplicate, flip horizontal, drag across to the other side. You can merge these, duplicate, flip vertical, pull those down to the bottom corner. There, and not perfect by any means, but it's a starting point, and it's kind of it there in concept, you know, to show you how to build up these nice sort of corner ornaments, how to intertwine the leaves, you know, as well as them being corner ornaments. We've got some really nice options of doing some sort of flourishes. So let's go with this one, which is a slightly different brush. I'll just transform that. Go somewhere like that. Duplicate it. Flip horizontal. Let's just merge these two together. And there, you know, really, really nice sort of little flourish that you can build upon again with more, you know, with your brushes more, sort of have more sort of sprouting out the top. But that's it. That's the kind of concept around vectorizing the scrolls, building up the brushes, making your shape library, intertwining them, and just having a really handy tool where you can kind of, you know, have unlimited fun with it really, and just kind of build upon it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my shapes that I've made on the Patreon page so that any of my patrons can access them. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.